When you first see this gun, it honestly doesn't look like it belongs in a war museum. It looks like something built out of spare plumbing parts. A metal tube for a barrel, a skinny wire stock, and a boxy magazine sticking out of the side like an afterthought. If I told you this ugly little pipe gun helped arm desperate soldiers and secret resistance fighters all across Europe, you might not believe me. But that's exactly what it did. In this video, we're going to talk about one of the strangest success stories in firearm history, the British Sten gun. No glorification, no step-by-step instructions, just the story of how a cheap, simple chunk of steel became a symbol of survival and resistance in World War II, and why historians and collectors still talk about it today. So let's pick this thing up and take a closer look. And imagine holding it in your hands for the first time. There's no polished wood, no fancy engraving, no sense of luxury at all. You feel cold metal everywhere. The main body is just a straight steel tube with a long, narrow barrel sticking out of the front. On one side, there's that tall, thin magazine, like a metal rectangle glued to the gun's left side. The stock at the back looks like someone bent a steel rod into the rough shape of a shoulder brace and decided, yeah, that's good enough. This is not a gun designed to impress on a parade ground or to look good in a photograph. It was designed for one thing: to be made fast, made cheap, and made in huge numbers. To understand why it looks like this, you have to picture Britain in 1940. The army has just escaped from Dunkirk. Thousands of guns, vehicles, and pieces of equipment are gone, abandoned on the beaches. A German invasion feels possible. Air raids are hitting cities. Suddenly, the British Army and home defense units have more people than weapons. Traditional submachine guns like the Thompson are powerful and reliable, but they're expensive and slow to build. They require lots of machining, high-quality steel, and skilled labor. Britain can't afford that anymore. Not in money, and not in time. What they need is a weapon that can be built almost like a metal kit. Simple shapes, minimal machining, something that small factories and workshops can put together with basic tools. Engineers are told, very bluntly, we don't need beautiful, we need something that works. That's where the Sten comes in. If you look closely at it, you can see the design logic everywhere. The receiver, the heart of the gun, is just a steel tube. You don't need a skilled craftsman to carve it out of a solid block. You just cut a tube to length and drill the right holes. The barrel slides into the front of that tube and is fixed in place. Openings are cut for the magazine, the trigger, and the ejection port. Many of the smaller pieces are stamped, pressed out of sheet metal like car body panels, and then welded or riveted on. The result is a weapon that almost looks unfinished, but that's the genius. Each flat surface, each rough edge, each visible weld is there because it saved time and money during production. You're looking at the pure language of wartime industry, as simple as it can be, and no simpler. Now imagine how it feels when you shoulder it. The wire stock isn't exactly comfortable, but it's light. Now, it doesn't wrap nicely into your shoulder the way a classic wooden stock does. It just rests there like a piece of bent steel because that's what it is. The gun balances differently from most rifles because of that side-mounted magazine. Instead of feeding from underneath, the Sten takes its ammunition from the left, leaving the bottom of the gun basically empty and clean. Your support hand naturally finds a place on the barrel shroud or around the magazine well, and your trigger hand wraps around a very simple grip and trigger frame made of more stamped metal. Inside, the mechanism is about as straightforward as it gets for a submachine gun. No complicated gas systems, no rotating locking lugs, nothing that requires tight tolerances. There's a heavy chunk of metal, the bolt, and a spring behind it. When the gun is ready to fire, the bolt sits locked back. You pull the trigger, the bolt moves forward under spring pressure, picks up a 9mm cartridge from the magazine, and the gun fires as the bolt closes enough to ignite the primer. The recoil pushes the bolt back again, ejecting the empty case, and the cycle repeats as long as you hold the trigger and there's ammunition in the magazine. From a user's point of view, that means a few things. First, when you're not firing, you can literally see that the bolt is to the rear. The gun feels cocked in a very physical way. There's a visible and audible sense of readiness. Second, when it runs, it has that classic open bolt rhythm, a clacking mechanical chatter that feels more industrial than refined. It doesn't whisper precision, it shouts simple, brutal function. If you're standing behind one being fired, you don't feel a carefully tuned instrument. You feel raw function, a tube, a spring, and a bolt doing exactly what they were designed to do over and over again. So why did this strange little gun matter so much? Because almost any small workshop could help make it. That steel tube, those stamped parts, that simple bolt, all of them could be manufactured in places that had never built weapons before. You didn't need a giant traditional gun factory with rows of lathes and master machinists. You just needed metal, presses, welders, and a clear set of drawings. That meant Britain could turn its industrial network into one giant production line for this simple gun. Factories that used to build car components, metal brackets, or household hardware could now contribute parts for the Sten. Railway workshops, small engineering firms, and subcontractors all became part of the chain. Everything about it was designed so you could throw numbers at the problem. Quantity over beauty, speed over elegance. And there was another very practical advantage. Because the Sten used a common 9x19mm pistol cartridge, the same type widely used in Europe, it was easier to keep fed in the chaotic logistics of war than some more exotic calibers. Using a common round meant it could share ammunition with other weapons in Allied service and, in some cases, even with captured stocks. On paper, it sounds almost too perfect. A cheap, simple, mass-produced submachine gun that uses a widely available cartridge and can be built practically anywhere. In real life, of course, it had flaws. If you talk to people who've handled original examples, one complaint comes up again and again. The magazine. That tall, narrow box on the side is the weak link. It holds plenty of rounds, but if it's dented, dirty, or loaded carelessly, it can cause feeding problems. That means jams, stuttering bursts, or complete stoppages if it isn't treated with respect. So the gun itself is tough and uncomplicated, but it relies heavily on a part that likes to be clean and correctly loaded. It's like having a simple, reliable car engine with a very fussy fuel system. It runs, but only if you give it the right conditions. There were also safety concerns. Because the gun fired from an open bolt and used a simple sear, a hard knock or drop could occasionally make the bolt jump forward if everything wasn't secured properly. That's why careful handling and proper safeties mattered so much with this design. Yama's soldiers and resistance members had to learn not just how to use it, but how to carry it, store it, and move with it without unwanted surprises. Despite these issues, the Sten did exactly what it was designed to do. It put automatic firepower into the hands of many, very quickly. Imagine a British paratrooper or commando preparing for a raid. On a table in front of him, there might be two very different weapons. In one hand, a compact, extremely expensive, finely machined gun might feel great, heavy, solid, and beautifully finished. In the other hand, a Sten feels cheap. The edges are a little sharp, the welds are clearly visible, and it doesn't feel like a luxury item. But it's light, it's easy to carry, and if the mission goes wrong and the gun is lost, it can be replaced without crippling the budget. For missions where stealth and surprise were more important than long-range accuracy, this little pipe gun was good enough. Some versions were even fitted with integrated suppressors, turning the harsh clatter into a softer, muffled rhythm, more suitable for close-up, high-risk operations. Again, no details here on how that's done, just the historical fact that quieter variants existed, and saw use in specialized units. But maybe the most powerful part of the Stens story doesn't happen in official units at all. It happens in the shadows, in occupied countries, far from the big front lines and famous battles. Picture a small group of resistance members in a barn or basement. Crates have been dropped by parachute in the night. Inside, simple, rugged guns that don't require months of formal training to operate. It's a short briefing on safe handling, loading, and aiming is enough to turn a group of determined civilians into a serious threat to occupying forces. The Sten is perfect for this role. It's small, it's relatively light, and it doesn't scream expensive military hardware. You can hide it under a coat, wrap it in cloth, tuck it under floorboards, or in the hollow of a wall. Its industrial, almost homemade look fits the underground world it's dropped into. It blends into basements, back rooms, barns, and sheds. For these fighters, the gun is more than steel. It's proof that someone outside their country still cares enough to take the risk of sending help. It's a sign that they're not completely alone, that there are allies out there willing to share scarce weapons. Yes, a weapon like this becomes psychological as much as practical. It gives them the confidence to keep going and to organize, not just to react. The design is also contagious. Because it's so simple, it inspires copies. In some places, local workshops quietly build their own versions based on captured or delivered examples. Metalworkers who might have repaired farm equipment or machinery before the war now apply those skills to making receiver tubes, stocks, and small parts. The idea of the Sten, a gun anyone with the right tools can put together, spreads almost like a technology template, even when official supplies are limited. Back in regular Army service, soldiers have mixed feelings. Some love it for what it is, a compact automatic weapon that gives them more close-range firepower than a bolt-action rifle. And others complain about the rough construction, the awkward side magazine, and the feeling that it might not always behave itself. To some, it feels like a stopgap. To others, it feels like exactly what the situation demanded. And yet, when you look at the big picture, the impact is undeniable. By the end of the war, huge numbers of these simple guns have been produced. They've equipped home defense units, airborne troops, commandos, and underground fighters. They've appeared in cities, forests, mountains, and villages under occupation. They've turned small groups of determined people into serious, coordinated threats that occupying forces had to constantly worry about. After the war, more modern designs gradually replace it in frontline service. Some armed forces move on to sleeker weapons with improved ergonomics, with better safety mechanisms, and more polished appearance. Many Stens are stored, sold, or scrapped. Others travel further, showing up in smaller conflicts around the world as surplus stock is redistributed. Today, when you see one on a display stand in a museum, it doesn't look like a hero. It doesn't dominate the room with shiny steel or elegant lines. It just sits there, a slightly awkward metal tube with a box on the side and a bent wire for a stock. People walk past rifles with rich wooden stocks and carefully machined parts, then glance at this strange, simple thing and wonder why it's even there. But if you know the story, you don't see cheapness. You see a country that needed to arm itself fast. You see small factories switching from everyday products to stamped gun parts. You see workers learning new tasks on the fly. Now drilling holes in tubes and welding brackets because that's what the moment demanded. You see resistance fighters, far from home support, holding something that finally gives them a fighting chance. The Sten gun is a reminder that, in extreme situations, function can matter more than form. It shows how design can be stripped down to the absolute essentials: a tube, a spring, a bolt, a magazine. No luxury. No polish, just enough engineering to do the job under desperate circumstances. In a world filled with iconic, beautiful firearms that collectors admire for their looks and craftsmanship, this one stands out precisely because it isn't beautiful. It's honest. What you see is exactly what it is. A tool created in a hurry for a desperate moment in history by people who didn't have the luxury of perfection. So the next time you see a picture of this pipe gun, try to look past the rough welds and simple lines. Think about the hands that held it, the factory workers who pieced it together under pressure, the nervous paratrooper stepping into the dark with one slung across his chest, the resistance fighter hiding it under loose floorboards and hoping it would still be there the next day. For them, this wasn't junk. It was a lifeline made of steel. And that's how a crude, cheap British gun helped weaken the grip of one of history's most dangerous regimes. Not by being perfect, not by being pretty, but by existing in huge numbers, exactly where and when it was needed.